The world of the late Jurassic was a masterpiece of brutality. In the vast stretches of western North America, 150 million years ago, the land was a fractured paradise, a place of extreme and violent contrasts. This was the Morrison Formation, an ancient floodplain that pulsed with life but was governed by hardship. Severe dry seasons regularly scorched the earth, turning lush plains into cracked badlands and vibrant rivers into muddy graves. In this unforgiving arena, only the truly mighty could carve out a territory and call this place home. And this was, without question, the land of the giants. Titanic sauropods, creatures like Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus, moved like walking mountains, their footsteps shaking the ground. Herds of the plated Stegosaurus browsed the low-lying flora, their thagomisers a constant, lethal warning. But towering over them all, in reputation and in sheer predatory power, were the giant theropods, the infamous Allosaurus, a relentless pack hunter, the monstrous Torvosaurus, a heavy-hitting brawler, and the apex predator, the king before the T-Rex, the massive sauropods. These titans defined the ecosystem. They were the arbiters of life and death. But survival in this place was not merely a game of size. As the old saying goes, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And truer words could not be said for the true hellhound of these badlands, a medium-sized killer with a vicious disposition and a face built for war. The Ceratosaurus. Like many of its famous contemporaries, Ceratosaurus was first unearthed from the rich fossil beds of the Morrison Formation. Its story begins specifically at the Garden Park site in Colorado back in 1883. The discovery caused immediate excitement among the bone hunters of the 19th century. The specimen was not just a handful of fragments, it was astonishingly complete. This near-perfect skeleton allowed for a rapid description process, and just 1 year later, the legendary paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh officially described and named this new theropod. He called it Ceratosaurus nasicornis, a name meaning horned lizard with the nose horn, a direct and fitting tribute to its most bizarre and iconic feature. The completeness of this holotype specimen made Ceratosaurus the best-known theropod in America at the time. Yet, this didn't stop Marsh from creating a highly inaccurate reconstruction, one that gave the dinosaur incorrect proportions and an erroneous kangaroo-like posture. Science, however, is a process of correction. Thanks to a century of new discoveries and a vastly improved understanding of dinosaur biomechanics, paleontologists now have a much clearer and far more terrifying idea of what this ferocious animal truly looked like and how it behaved. Ceratosaurus was a medium-sized theropod, but medium, in the land of the giants, is still impressively large. Size estimates vary depending on the species. The type species, Ceratosaurus nasicornis, is estimated to have been around 5.7 meters, or nearly 19 feet long. Some individuals clearly got bigger, perhaps reaching 6 meters, or 20 feet. Another potential species, Ceratosaurus dentasulcatus, was even more grand, with one specimen suggesting a length of 7 meters, or 23 feet. This massive individual is thought to have weighed around 980 kilograms, or over 2,100 pounds, making it as hefty as some of the largest American bison. There is still scientific debate over whether these larger specimens represent a different species or are simply fully mature, older individuals of Ceratosaurus nasicornis at a different growth stage. But whatever the case, Ceratosaurus was by no means small. It was, however, consistently smaller than the apex predators it shared its environment with. It could not compete with Allosaurus or Torvosaurus in a simple contest of brute strength. To compensate, Ceratosaurus evolved a proportionally giant skull, a specialized killing weapon that gave it a distinct advantage. The front of the skull was robustly built and wide, designed to withstand immense stress and dish out powerful bites. The back of the skull, by contrast, was more lightly built. This unique combination of power and flexibility allowed Ceratosaurus to open its mouth extremely wide, a tactic essential for a predator. This versatility granted it a varied and adaptable diet. But what truly made Ceratosaurus deadly were its jaws and the teeth they held. The jaws were constructed with significant depth, not for crushing bone, but to act as a deep, stable root system for its roughly 26 blade-like teeth. And these were not ordinary teeth. They were proportionally enormous for its skull size, long, curved, and bearing very fine, yet uncharacteristically robust, serrations. The implication is chilling. Ceratosaurus would not have killed with a single crushing bite. It would have attacked, tearing and ripping, taking huge chunks of meat out of its prey at a time, causing severe, catastrophic blood loss. It was a brawler that bled its victims dry. This deadly bite wasn't the only unique thing about its skull. It's where we find its iconic horns. Ceratosaurus had two small bony ridges, or horns, in front of each eye, a trait also seen in its rival, Allosaurus. But what truly gripped paleontologists and what gives the animal its name was the prominent, standalone horn found right behind its nose. This nasal horn was by far the tallest. The bony core of it was 13 centimeters, or 5.1 inches long. In life, this core would have been covered by a keratinous sheath, much like the horns of modern cattle or the casque of a cassowary. This means the true size of the horn is uncertain. It was almost certainly larger and more pointed than the bone alone suggests. The horn was also wide at the base and much narrower at the top. This unique armament presented an immediate puzzle. Upon its discovery, paleontologists assumed the horn was the animal's primary weapon, a powerful tool for both hunting and defense, a Jurassic bayonet. But in recent times, this theory has fallen out of favor. The horn, while robust at the base, was likely too thin and fragile at the top to withstand the intense, unpredictable forces of combat with a struggling Stegosaurus or another theropod. Paleontologists are now convinced it was primarily used for social display. It was a billboard, a visual signal to other members of its species and perhaps to its rivals. It could have been used for species recognition, to intimidate smaller predators, or in interspecies combat during the mating season, where two males might shove and push each other for dominance without risking fatal injury. It's possible it was brightly colored, a vibrant warning, and a symbol of health and strength to attract a mate. The horn was not its only mystery. For decades, Ceratosaurus was imagined as a typical terrestrial predator, hunting dinosaurs like juvenile sauropods and Stegosaurus. But after the turn of the 21st century, light was cast upon certain findings that painted a very different and much wetter picture. Scientists began to notice a pattern. Ceratosaurus remains were most commonly found in and around water sources. Their fossils were abundant in ancient floodplains, lake margins, and swamps. In stark contrast, other carnivores like Allosaurus were found to be distributed equally amongst aquatic and dry terrestrial habitats. This led to a radical proposal. Ceratosaurus may have been a semi-aquatic carnivore, specializing in hunting fish, early crocodiles, and turtles. This conjecture was bolstered by a closer look at its anatomy. Paleontologists pointed out its flexible, deep tail as being distinctly crocodile-like, far more adapted for propulsion in water than the stiff, rudder-like tail of an Allosaurus. This led to the new conjecture that Ceratosaurus was an excellent swimmer that seasonally switched its diet. When the dry season hit and terrestrial prey grew scarce, it would retreat to the rivers and lakes, hunting the aquatic life that its rivals ignored. This claim of a semi-aquatic dinosaur was, and still is, polarizing in the community. Most scientists disagree that it was fully semi-aquatic in the way we now understand Spinosaurus to be. But a compelling new idea has risen from the debate. While Ceratosaurus was more adapted for hunting aquatic prey than its fellow theropods, it was for the most part still a terrestrial dinosaur. It was a generalist with a specialty. It was adept at scavenging and hunting other dinosaurs, but it had a clear advantage in riparian or riverside environments. This ability to exploit two different food chains was likely the secret to its success. It was how it survived in the shadow of giants. The lifestyle of Ceratosaurus cannot be understood in isolation. It was defined by the intense pressure from the other theropods that lived alongside it. To compensate for the high number of carnivores in its environment, Ceratosaurus had to reduce direct competition by filling a different ecological niche than its rivals. A landmark 1998 study demonstrated this perfectly. Researchers identified two different types, or morphs as they called it, of Allosaurus that lived in the Morrison. One morph had a short, robust snout, and the other had a longer, more delicate snout. The study highlighted a fascinating pattern. The remains of Ceratosaurus were common in areas that also had the short-snouted Allosaurus, but Ceratosaurus was extremely rare in locations that possessed remains of the long-snouted Allosaurus. To paleontologists, this was clear evidence of niche partitioning, the natural avoidance of competition. The skull of Ceratosaurus was functionally similar to the long-snouted Allosaurus, meaning they likely hunted similar prey and had closer diets. This created intense competition, and the larger Allosaurus likely drove Ceratosaurus out of any habitat it claimed. Conversely, the short-snouted Allosaurus had a different enough skull that it likely hunted different prey, meaning it did not compete as much with Ceratosaurus. This explains their high level of co-occurrence. They could live side by side because they were not on the hunt for the same meal. However, despite these best efforts to avoid conflict, the hellish nightmare that the Jurassic could be drove direct, violent confrontations from time to time. This is where Ceratosaurus earned its reputation. The severe dry seasons and extended droughts turned its world into a pressure cooker. Resources dwindled to almost nothing, and the land became a desperate, stressful place. This desperation resulted in crazed cannibalism, aggressive scavenging, and brutal competition. Perhaps the best and most terrifying example of this comes from the Mygut Moor Quarry in Colorado. Excavations there revealed a staggering statistic. 30% of all dinosaur bones found in the area had at least one theropod bite mark. This was a mind-blowing number, considering that the average dig site had a bite rate of less than 4%. Even more bewildering was that after sauropods, theropods themselves, the predators, were the ones who suffered the most bites. Research showed that Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus were the main culprits in this cesspit of carnage. This evidence portrays an extremely stressed ecosystem. Ceratosaurus and its rivals were forced to prey on and scavenge anything they could find, including each other. This led to numerous direct, fatal confrontations. Additional evidence also shows that Ceratosaurus possibly came into conflict with the other large theropods, Torvosaurus and Saurophaganax. It was in times like these, in these starved, desperate battles for survival, that the true ferociousness of Ceratosaurus was fully displayed. Only the toughest, and perhaps the most vicious, could endure those dark times. But the home of Ceratosaurus was not always this brutal. There were also distinct wet seasons, periods of plenty, during which rivers flooded, floodplains bloomed, and the lakes and swamps became full of life. It was partially thanks to these golden days that the Morrison Formation is known as the most fertile source of dinosaur bones in North America. It was a true, real-life Jurassic Park. All walks of dinosaur life called it home. Sauropods, as we know, were plentiful. Apatosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Camarasaurus, and Diplodocus all lumbered through the lands. Additionally, other herbivore residents included the Camptosaurus, Dryosaurus, Othnielia, the armored Gargoyleosaurus, and the extremely famous Stegosaurus. Dinosaurs were by no means the only animals. Non-dinosaur life was present in the form of ray-finned fishes, turtles, lizards, sphenodonts, frogs, and salamanders. Critically for Ceratosaurus, the waters were filled with aquatic crocodilomorphs such as Amphicodilus. Multiple species of pterosaurs, like Mesodactylus, soared in the skies above. The flora of this environment was diverse and rich, a world without flowers, consisting of fungi, mosses, horsetails, vast forests of cycads, ginkgos, and a variety of conifers. The Ceratosaurus walked alongside all this different life, navigating its complex world of feast and famine between 153 to 148 million years ago. This was an impressive and successful reign. But even with its grit, its specialized teeth, and its unique survival strategies, the horned lizard could not scour the lands forever. Along with all the other Morrison dinosaurs, it disappeared. No one is entirely sure what took out the Ceratosaurus and its famous contemporaries, but seeing that its environment was so prone to volatile, stressful times, it is widely thought that a particularly extended period of harsh conditions, a drought that lasted for centuries, may have contributed to the demise of this Jurassic hellhound. The world changed, the water disappeared, and even this ultimate survivor could not adapt quickly enough. Its reign was over, leaving only its iconic bones to tell the tale of a brutal life in a brutal land.